have a court order at Ladora. And we've just have a lot of problems with state oversight of mental health. And what we get with local funding supported by our supervisors is local interest and local accountability for results. And even though some people might say, well, we could do better, our local system could do better, we would all agree at that. But when you erase the involvement of local elected officials in the oversight, I think you lose kind of a secret ingredient, or the glue, frankly, that holds the system together. In addition, it includes some getting rid of a tax exemption for the donation of land for conservation purposes. It changes how we deal with, we give some really nice tax advantage to people that manage woodlands and forests in Iowa. They propose making changes in that are I think not necessary. And then finally, probably the other thing in this bill is it speeds up some tax cuts that were approved in 2018 by getting rid of the so-called triggers, these things that were put in the law in 2018, that if they didn't happen, the tax cut wouldn't happen. So they want to accelerate that. So this is essentially a whole bunch of ideas. It's, as I say, the wish list of Senate Republicans on tax policy. And when you think about tax policy, it's also about spending money. The other thing that has started in the last week is we're beginning to move budget bills in both the House and the Senate. Typically, we have about 10 different budget bills. We divide them up where they start. Some start in the House, some start in the Senate. And this year, because Republicans in the House and the Senate are not getting along, they've decided to basically do all the bills. We're going to do all the bills in the Senate, send them all to the House. The House is going to take up every bill and send them all to the Senate. And at some point, we'll negotiate on the appropriation side of the budget. So think of education, transportation, human services, the courts, justice, all those budgets are appropriated spending. And they want to basically try and figure out a way to wed all the spending with this major tax bill, because it also has to balance out to the bottom line. So that's in the works now. We've been moving these bills. This coming week is going to be a really busy week for the Appropriations Committee. I'm the ranking member of this on the Senate side of appropriations, so it'll be a busy week. Mostly, we're just trying to offer at this point our advice to the Republicans on how to do things better and perfect what they're doing. They're not taking much of our advice, sadly. And so I'm going to stop with that. I know Christina will have a good update on the House, and try and leave a little bit more time for what you all want to talk about tonight. So thanks for having me.
Hey everybody, so good to see you. Thanks, Joe. And I just have to say, Joe, thank you for those kind words. And you know, Joe has been an amazing source of support and mentorship to me. It's been really helpful, really helpful to have him to talk to about all kinds of things. I'll just send him a text. What do you do about this? And he responds really quickly and helpfully, and has always been very encouraging to me in my things on the floor and everywhere else. So thank you, Joe. And thanks for all your years of fighting this fight. I mean, I've been there for 13 weeks and I'm like, wow, you've been doing this for how long? So thank you. Okay, so yeah, so I'll pick up a little bit on what's happening in the House. So just to kind of recap a little bit, we've, as Joe said, it really has been kind of a culture war. I mean, here we are in the middle of a pandemic when people really need help. And we're passing bills that allow landlords to discriminate against low-income people in renting their apartments and other housing. And we're not passing bills to protect people in manufactured housing communities from all kinds of abuses. And so, you know, those are the things we're not doing. And then at the same time, we're passing gun bills because, of course, we need more gun bills. And you know, this one of them allows people to carry guns without permits, pretty much any public place. And the effect of that is to eliminate a lot of background checks, because a lot of people got their background check when they applied for the permit to carry. And when we do away with that, there's no longer a background check unless you buy through a federally licensed dealer. And of course, a lot of people don't. They buy through local kind of private sales, sort of almost anonymous or stranger sales through Craigslist or something else. And so that would do away with a lot of background checks, even though some 80–85% of people support permits and background checks. That passed both houses. The governor has now signed it, even though she said 2 years ago she didn't support it, that she supported the idea of permits and background checks. So clearly she is not telling the party what to do. They are telling her what to do. So that's what's happening with guns. The abortion bill that the House passed earlier went over to the Senate. The Senate, not Joe, of course, but the Senate Republicans amended it and changed the language of it a bit. That's interesting because it's now what we call a bouncing bill, right? And so it's come back over to the House. But what's interesting about it is, number one, we think that it changed the language to sort of try to justify to the public why it was passing this constitutional amendment on abortion, to eliminate all right to abortion in any cases, in any circumstances. We think that they're doing that in part as a result of a Des Moines Register survey that showed that something like 30% or so of Iowans supported that. The rest of them either absolutely did not support it or didn't know. And so we think that they're seeing how unpopular that is, and now are attempting to try to put language in there that would explain to the public why they're doing it, or to try to scare the public into doing it by including language about, abortions up till the day of birth and so on, which is nonsense. I mean, no one supports abortion up till the day of birth. That is just a disgusting scare tactic that the Republicans are using to try to justify all kinds of restrictions on this. What's interesting about it is apparently the language that the Senate put in is language that the House rejected last year. And so now we do have more Republicans in the House now, so maybe that changes the balance, but it'll be interesting to see what the House's response is to that bill, given the Des Moines Register survey, given this new language that was rejected last year. So we'll see what happens with that. We expect you all know about the terrible election bill that was passed and that the governor has now signed. It's truly a horrific bill, no reason for it. There is a so-called technical corrections bill now coming forward to try to deal with some of the issues in that bill. We're going to see what they do, but the problem is, Bobby Kaufman, who's running that bill, has said that he wants broad bipartisan support. He really wants unanimous support. I think, they know that that's a very unpopular bill, and they're hoping the Democrats will join them on this technical corrections bill to make them kind of look better about what they're doing. Frankly, I have said, and I think a lot of the caucus agrees, that I will not sign on to that bill unless it really makes significant changes. And I don't know that the Republicans are willing to make those kinds of changes. But I don't think the Democrats should rescue the Republicans with this bill. They will pass what they think they want to pass. But I don't want the message to be that the Republicans fixed everything in the election bill and now the Democrats are signing on to it. I think that would be a bad message. I think they have made their bed and they need to lie in it. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think they'll correct the things they're willing to correct anyway. And they think they need to. But I don't think the Democrats need to come in and save them for that. So we'll see. We'll have that conversation in our caucus and so on. We have a policing bill coming up. Actually today, Janice Weiner, city councilwoman, and I have been busy working on an op-ed about that bill. Lots of problems with this bill. It really, just to give one example, it allows a driver to plow into a group of protesters, even if the driver's driving negligently or grossly negligently, and have no liability. It immunizes a driver from liability if protesters are blocking the road, and so just allows them to kind of run over them. There are pieces of this bill that are just shocking, and so that's going to be a big fight coming up in either this week or probably the following week. There are things about the bill, about the process that police have for when they go under internal investigation for wrongdoing. There are increased penalties for protesters, even when they're kind of vague definitions about what's a riot or what's an unlawful assembly. And now this bill kind of enhances the penalties for engaging in those things. So I think it's really problematic from the standpoint of kind of chilling people, making them scared to engage in protest and, you know, that sort of thing because of these increased penalties. So there's a lot going on there. I think that's coming in the next week or two. On budget stuff, I'm not going to say a lot. I'll just say quickly, I'm on the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee. The unfortunate thing about that that came out of subcommittee this past week is no increased funding for the REAP project. So that's the Resource Enhancement and Protection aspect. So that's basically basic environmental protection. They're keeping that at 12 million, which it has been for the last few years. It's supposed to be funded at $20 million. They're not adding any new money for that. And no new money for water quality, even though our water quality has just gotten worse and worse and worse. We have more impaired waterways now than I think we have in, you know, forever, and no new money for that. So I voted against that funding bill. There is $500,000 for innovative new kind of farming techniques and opening up new markets. So, you know, that could be sort of more organic type things, different kinds of farming techniques that isn't just the kind of the typical commercial commodity, large scale farming. And so you know, that could be interesting. I would love to see us put more money into that sort of thing. So that was one bright spot of that. Education, higher education is not good right now. The House Education Appropriations Committee just voted for no increase in higher education funding for this year. So it's going to stay the same as it was last year. And last year was actually a cut. Higher education was the only area of the budget that was cut last year during the pandemic. And so this year we had asked to reinstate that $8 million and then add some to it. And instead, the House Education Appropriations Committee kept it where it was last year, which includes that $8 million cut. So we're hoping that as we're hearing, you know, that we think that the Senate picture might be better. So we're hopeful for that. But that was kind of an ugly one coming out of the Education Appropriations Committee. So I will stop there, but I would love to, you know, like Joe said, hear your thoughts and any questions you have about any bills, and just have the conversation. Thanks.
Roseanne, are you running this part or am I running this part?
Oh, I thought you were running this part.
Oh, sure. Okay, I'll do it. So yeah, if anybody has questions about any bills that are kind of at the top of your list of things to be worried about. I know a lot of people in Iowa City are thinking about the bottle bill, for example, which we haven't heard yet about. So if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand and unmute yourself and ask your question. Oh, somebody, let's see, Roseanne has a question.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, you know, I'm curious because I've heard about this for references to this the last few days about the antipathy between the House and the Senate Republicans, that they're not getting along. What does that mean? And is there any hope in for us in they're not getting along?
Well, I'll start.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, they haven't gotten along for a little while. I mean, they rarely speak to the governor. I think, you know, the governor sends up a budget. She has all her priorities. She never gets anything she wants because she doesn't really pay much attention to the legislators, even in her own party. And then when you've been in charge for 5 years, you get on the nerves of your family members as well, right? And that's kind of what's happened here. We've gone back and forth between who wants to be more conservative. It's amazing that the Senate's going to maybe do better on higher education than the House, because the Senate doesn't want to spend money on anything. So that at the end of the day, you know, just it might delay the process. It's interesting to see them, and they do most of their quarreling behind the scenes, and we hear about it from staff or individual senators. But we're scheduled to adjourn April 30th. And I suspect whatever differences they have, they're not great, especially on the appropriation side. I do think they are going to fight over this tax bill that I reviewed earlier. They really would like to get a few of the Senate Republicans really would like to get as much of that as they can. And that'll be part of the negotiation over the spending side of the budget and that big package of stuff. I think the House Republicans are not as enamored with some of those tax ideas. So I think that'll be where the holdup will be. But at the end of the day, they know they need to come together, and they will. They always do.
Yeah, I'll just say, I've written about that in my newsletter, and yeah, it sounds like they really, really are not getting along. They're just not talking to each other, and as a result, as Joe said, they're just doing their own budget bills on kind of both sides, just completely doing their own thing, and then they'll come together at the end, I suppose. I think that there is some hope coming out of it. I mean, I think on education is where we've really seen the differences. The House did not pass the vouchers bill that the Senate sent over. And I think, honestly, that was one of the things that really provoked a lot of disagreement between the two. I mean, it was ongoing, but, I think that was a big one. And then on the charter schools bill, the House amended it to require open meetings of these charter school boards. And that was something that the Senate really didn't want. But I'll tell you, it is really interesting how it works. As Joe said, it's interesting to think that the Senate might give more on higher education money than the House. The House has been really angry with the universities, the Regents universities this year. And so it looks like the Senate might be a little more generous on that. So yeah, I do think that there's a little bit good for the Democrats. We'll have to see about the abortion bill. My guess is that they want it so badly, they'll go ahead and do it. And they'll come up with some language or something, but it is really interesting, especially with the way this survey, it's Des Moines Register survey and things work in there. We'll have to see what happens with that. And they're also negotiating the bottle bill. I'll just say something about this real quick since somebody mentioned it. That is another area that we're seeing some negotiation there. I'm hopeful that we will get to increasing the handling fee, that to incentivize redemption centers to locate closer to the grocery stores and so on. There's a lot of talk about increasing that fee from 1 cent to 2 cents, which would get us a lot closer to making those redemption centers more profitable and more viable. So we hope that we'll see more of them. So my understanding is that the House and Senate have been talking back and forth about that one. So we'll have to see how that goes. Sarah just put in the chat that there is a subcommittee meeting for the bottle bill in the Ways and Means Committee tomorrow at 12:30 at the Capitol. If any of you really care about that bill, I would strongly encourage you to either go there because you can't, unfortunately, speak unless you're actually present in the Capitol. But you could speak on that or post comments if you can't be there. So I really encourage you to do that. There are lots of other things going on with the bottle bill. I'm a little concerned about where we're going to end up because I think we could end up, hopefully, getting to the 2 cent handling fee, but there are also things in there about driving for 10 or 15 miles to redeem your bottles and things, which just really isn't going to be very feasible. So we'll have to see where all of that ends up.
Yeah.
Christina's been,
go ahead.
just on the bottle bill, Christina's been doing a lot of good work on it. I'm concerned, though, the Senate Majority Leader, I think, was on Iowa Press on Friday, and I think again today, and he called the bill dead. So I don't know, the members continue to work, but at the end of the day, the Majority Leader is going to decide whether he runs over the beer distributors, and I think mostly the beer distributors, to get this done. But so I hope there's still hope for the bottle bill, but it appears that it's dead for the year.
Well, that would be a bummer after all that hard work.
Yeah.
We have a question from, I'll go down the list of people who have their hands in the air. The first is Cecilia Norris has a question. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Cecilia, and ask your question.
Can I actually have somebody else answer while I'm getting my barking dogs put away?
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. So we go to, let's see, it's not Leanne, but Cortamiglia. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, this is John Gross. I'm the other one with the mustache. Leanne doesn't have a mustache, but we're both on the same server. So I'm concerned about the efforts of the Republicans to start controlling our education. They're trying to ban the 1619 project, a Pulitzer Prize document that they're trying to keep out of our schools. Is this the first step in book banning? Is it somehow beneficial to the Republicans to keep people stupid.
Well,
That-
maybe. Yeah, it's a really good question. So fortunately, the good news out of this is that the 1619 bill is dead for this session. So we will not see that happen, I don't think, unless it somehow magically gets attached to something else. But I think it's dead for this session. There just was not, I think it was very controversial and they didn't want to move it forward. That's the kind of thing, frankly, that would be sort of like a transgender bathroom bill or an anti-immigration bill, one of these kinds of things that I think could really make the state look like a backwater and provoke some kind of response from business or other entities, like we've seen in other places like in North Carolina and in Arizona, where these really backward bills get passed, and then there's an economic or a response from business. So fortunately, that did not happen. But you're totally right that it is pretty ironic that this Republican Party, who talks a lot about free speech for conservative speech, then wants to prohibit ideas like the 1619 Project and in other discussion of racial justice type ideas. So I had an interesting exchange on that 1619 Project with a number of different Republicans, and it was interesting the way they see it. They anything that doesn't comport with their kind of view of history, or that doesn't sort of exalt our founding fathers and make them look like gods, they reject. I mean, they have a very strict view of our history and our values, and everything else is viewed as anti-American. And I just reject it outright. I think they're wrong, and I think they really undermine their so-called commitment to free speech when they do these kinds of things.
I want to thank both of you for speaking to us tonight, and note that neither of you seem depressed. And when I start thinking about Iowa government, I'm depressed. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, let me add on to what Christina said on the 1619 Project, and it's good to see you, John. Thanks for the question. I think we're really experiencing a kind of a backlash from the civil unrest and racial unrest we had last summer here in Iowa, and it not only comes up in the free speech bill and in the blocking of the 1619 Project, and how we can talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and implicit bias in workplaces, all the pro-police guns on qualified immunity, defund the police, stiffer penalties for protesters at rallies, is all part of a narrative, I think, that Republicans in Iowa are pushing back against racially, efforts to make Iowa a more racially equal place. We haven't taken up a single issue dealing with any of the challenges to Black or Brown Iowans on education gap, health inequities, a whole host of criminal justice issues. 25% of Iowa's prison population is Black. You're 25% more likely to die of cancer if you're Black. There's a lot of issues, and none of that's getting any attention as we I don't want to say it's about white supremacy or white nationalism, but just about, they are very, very sensitive to any conversation about everybody not, about racial equality, about what their potential role in solving the problems are. We have a lot of members in the General Assembly that have virtually no interaction with people of color in their districts. They don't, either they don't have a lot of racial diversity, and they don't travel in circles where they meet up with people of color. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind for them. And when we have more urban members who have more racially diverse districts bring these issues up, it's just they bristle at the notion. So it's really a bad movement in Iowa, if you will. I don't know. It's been very depressing, and I think, frankly, it's a bit of a backlash. Since last June, we had a unanimous bill. We had this big bill signing, and we said you can't use chokeholds. Great, right? We need to pass a bill, say you can't choke people, and we got to get rid of bad cops. Okay, we should be doing that anyway. And since then, there's been nothing on racial profiling, nothing on marijuana reform. And we're just in a bad spot. And there's still a few of these bills are still wandering around out there. And then I think just broadly on higher education, you know, we had a record number of bills against our public. It's really mostly public universities. It's not the community colleges. It's not our private colleges. It's targeted to Iowa City mostly, but all three public universities. And you know, it's depressing to see 16 or 17 bills introduced that make national headlines that just put us in a really bad spot to retain people, to recruit people. I'm told we have really good candidates for our new president here at the university, which is good news. But we have work to do to get to figure out a way to talk about race and work for progress on issues of people of color.
Thanks, Joe. So we have a couple more questions. We'll hear first, we'll go back to Cecilia, and then coming up next will be Kathleen Vanderwall and Becky and Tim Krezowick. You'll be after that, and then we'll get to Kieran, who asked a question in the chat. So go ahead, Cecilia, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you for, first of all, to Joe and Christina for serving, because I'm sure this is a very challenging time. I am a physician and I have been overwhelmed with the pandemic and the issues surrounding it. And then double whammy of all of these bills that are going to negatively impact not only the health, but the economic security of Iowans. And I feel like I have limited time to do advocating. The times that I have written to legislators, the Republican legislators, they don't listen to facts. They don't listen to history. For example, you know, when they passed the abortion bill and abortion rate actually went up 25%, they don't listen to the experts that they have in the state, and they don't seem to care that our young people are leaving the state and not planning to return if we have these backwards draconian measures. My daughter is going to Minnesota instead of Iowa because she just can't believe how discriminatory and anti-woman Iowa has become. So do you have any suggestions about how to most effectively advocate for common sense measures that benefit the general population?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. You're totally right. And you know, and I worry about that too. I mean, I worry a lot about young people and their decisions to leave Iowa. You know, I think that is something that's at the forefront of my mind. And you will hear the Republicans talk about that. They want to keep professionals here. They want to increase the workforce. They're worried about the population decline, you know, all of these things. And yet they're doing all, I mean, they couldn't do it better if they set out to actually, you know, make these things worse. So, it's really tough. I mean, I'll tell you, you know, I would say, keep doing what you're doing. I know that it seems hard sometimes, you know, and it seems like they're not listening. But you know, I will say that I think sometimes in caucus, I think they have more conversations in caucus and discuss things, you know, and sometimes just don't bring bills to the floor when, you know, when there are significant problems. If it comes to the floor, they will vote for it. I mean, pretty much across the board, at least in the House. But you know, sometimes we can sort of make arguments that maybe they won't acknowledge that sway them, but sometimes they will kind of behind closed doors. They'll just decide not to bring something forward. You know, the abortion one is really hard. I have been really fighting about this. You know, I've talked about the history of abortion in Iowa. They tell a very different story than what the facts really are. And the public health aspect of it, just the number of women who died having these abortions, and I think people have forgotten, right? I mean, the people who are legislating today mostly weren't around at that time, or at least don't really remember what that would have been like. And so I think we just have to keep fighting that fight. You know, I do think that just sheer numbers, if they know that Iowans don't support this, I think that, you know, that I do think that's had an effect with that survey that was done in the Des Moines Register. Now, that's not to say necessarily they won't pass it, but I think it's given them some pause and caused people to think a little bit more. I also think that maybe doing things a little bit, you know, I'll tell you one thing I tell people. whenever people from Iowa City ask me how to advocate for things, I always say, don't tell them you're from Iowa City. Whenever I have somebody like write to them, I was like, just don't tell them you're an Iowan. Don't tell them where you're from, because if you tell them you're from Iowa City, they're going to say, oh, they're going to discount that. Of course, all the people from Iowa City think that, right? So I just say, don't identify yourself as being from Iowa City. But the other thing is just maybe going a little bit more, circuitously and talking to businesses, other organizations to get them to advocate. Sometimes you can have more success by working with businesses and having them assert some pressure on some of these issues, and especially on some of these hot button issues like the abortion issue, some of these racial issues. Sometimes as we're seeing other places, sometimes businesses will take a stand. We're starting, we said it with Major League Baseball and with Coke and Delta and all those in Georgia and these different ones. And, it's becoming a big fight. But I think that at some point, the Republicans need to know that things they're doing are not going to sit well with maybe some of their supporters or maybe some of the people who matter to them. We saw that with the tenure bill. The pork producers, the soybean growers, came in and said no. They registered against the bill eliminating tenure. And I think that was a very strong statement, for the Republicans, not just this session, but going forward, thinking about introducing this thing, all the time, the way that they do. So, I think that some things like that matter. But the other thing I'll say, and this is related to the previous question as well, there is some cyclical stuff here. I mean, we do, if you go back and you look over time at the control of the legislature, there's an ebb and a flow, right? There's sometimes it's the Democrats, sometimes it's the Republicans. We're in a very bad stretch right now. But what tends to happen is that as one party consolidates power, they tend to get more and more extreme, right? And then the more extreme they get, the more out of touch they get with the average Iowan. And then that's when we generally start to see some change or some shift back. And we had a tough election in 2020. It was just tough. I mean, what was going on nationally, people rode the Trump wave, they got in power, but they didn't run on these issues. Everybody thought we were going to flip the House. And so they didn't run on these issues. Most of them ran on a more moderate type ticket. And a lot of people won their elections. A lot of those Republicans won their swing district elections by just 100 votes, 200 votes, 300 votes. And when they start to get more extreme like this, I'm hopeful that is going to hurt them in the next round. And the Democrats have to get out there and really put our message out and make sure people know that and hold them accountable. But I guess I would just say, I'm not depressed. I'm frustrated. But I'm not too depressed yet, because I do think that there is change. I think that we see these things happening cyclically, and I'm still hopeful that this is not a permanent trend, that this is something that could ebb and flow as we've seen in the past.
Joe, do you want to add anything?
Well, we're in a rough patch right now. We need 99 county potluck insurgencies, right? I mean, we need to get organized. We need to continue to work to get organized and present our issues. I mean, I think we're also in this swirl of kind of a national culture war, where all these states are passing more election restrictions. All these states are doing more to get guns into people's hands. States are doing more to restrict abortion. I mean, I think we are locked into who can be the most extreme. And 5 years into this, with Republican in complete control, they haven't been held accountable at this point for anything they've done over the last 5 years. And we'll get another chance in 2022. I've been involved with our Senate caucus. We have a new leader, Senator Walz, who's doing a fantastic job. We just hired a new political director that's going to run our campaigns in 2022. And we are getting ready right now to bring on a new finance person and begin recruiting candidates. I think the most important thing that the political people can do is get out there and recruit really good candidates to take this on in 2022. We are only going to turn this around at the polls. And, I don't know, I think that the extremes are, as I think Christina indicates, is at some point, hopefully it's gonna catch up with them. Somebody's death by 1,000 cuts or something, right? And people are going to wake up, but they're doing a hell of a lot of damage in the interim. And they don't really since they haven't been held accountable on anything this session, they're just going about their business. I don't think they think twice that they're going to lose on these issues down the road. They don't seem very risk averse at all. So we need to continue to organize like you're doing. We're talking tonight. We're doing political education tonight on a whole host of things. But we're just going to have to stay active through the cycles. And I'll end with this. My first 6 years in the General Assembly, I was in the minority. I came in the minority like Christina has now, and it's a really good learning. It was a really good learning time, the first 6 years, to kind of learn the process, and she's learning that now, and hopefully not too long down the road, she's going to be in the majority doing some really good work for us.
Okay, we're starting to get to closer to the end of our question and answer time. So we're going to take 2 more questions. We'll start with Kathleen, and I don't know if we could just try to make it brief so we can get through the last 2 questions into the next part of the program. So go ahead, Kathleen, unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, I don't see Kathleen Vanderwall. Are you? Okay, so she's muted. Okay, here we go. Go ahead, ask your question.
Sorry, I'm particularly interested in mental health along with other things. And a couple of bills, I think. One that didn't get through the funnel was funding for telehealth. And telehealth has been really important for people who live in rural areas, and mental health clinicians especially have suffered because they are not reimbursed for seeing patients the same as over telehealth as they would if they saw these people in person. And the cost of seeing these people and administrating the whole thing is really not any less than it would be if they came to their office. So this bill that would advocate for that didn't pass the funnel, but there's another bill, 524, establishing a mental health bed tracking study committee that is in the unfinished business calendar, which would allow telehealth to be reimbursed as the same as an in-person visit to these clinicians. And I would really like to see that happen. Also, bill to fund the specialty courts for people who have mental health problems and substance abuse disorders. So that bill, I guess, survived the funnel, but it's in the state government committee this week because the House Ways and Means put an amendment onto it. So it would be nice if those 2 mental health bills could come to fruition, I think. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I think they're all struggling at this point to get over the finish line. I mean, I think to start with the telehealth medicine bill, I think the pandemic pretty clearly showed us all that telemedicine is like really helpful and really works. And we need it to be reimbursed in equal parity to in-person visits. Wellmark there's been a bunch of conversations with the insurers because if you pass this, it's a so-called mandate to require parity reimbursement. And I think for that bill appears to be dead. There was a bill that allowed for use of just the phone, not video, to do reimbursement for that. That might still be alive in the Senate. I think the House actually passed a decent bill to the Senate, and it was killed more or less by the chair of the Health and Human Service Committee in the Senate. The inpatient bed tracking is a really good bill. We should do that bill. The bill dealing with specialty courts and the funding for specialty courts is also a really good bill. But as we turn our attention kind of to the budgets now, it's really going to be important for advocates to reach out to the leaders of both Speaker Grassley and Majority Leader Jack Whitfer. At this point, when things are on the calendar under unfinished business, they have complete discretion of whether to call those bills up and bring them to the floor for a vote. So we need to put pressure on the leaders at this point in the process to get those moving.
I'm going to just jump in. I know Christina wants to talk about the courts bill, but we don't have time. I'm sorry. So just real quick, can we get to Becky and Tim, if you guys can ask your question, and then we'll address that really quickly and get on to our next section.
The question is where do we go from here? I mean, it's easy to be depressed. I think we're a little bit like preaching in church among this group, but how do we flip the paradigm right now and get back to what, for someone who came to Iowa in 1988 and valued Iowa because of its focus on education, its welcoming of immigrants, even going back to Republican administrations like Robert Ray. Where do we put our time and treasure right now to flip Iowa back to where some of us believe Iowa was and should be?
Do you want to start or?
No, go ahead.
So, I mean, I will tell you, first of all, the absolutely most important thing is not to get depressed, or at least if you are depressed, don't let it paralyze you. Okay. I mean, truly, I mean that. That is one of the biggest concerns I have, is that we will be so demoralized that we won't do what it takes to turn things around. I know I'm new. I know I have the optimism of the new, right? But you know, I think that's actually really important because, for example, I come into my caucus, and I'll get to, you know, what organizers like you can do in a minute, but you know, I come into my caucus and I see people who have been around for a very long time, and it's demoralizing, you know, and as a result, sometimes we don't do as much as we could do. We don't fight as hard as we could. We don't put our best foot forward because, you know, we've done it in the past and it hasn't worked. And sometimes that can be discouraging, you know, to people. And so I think it's good to have new people to come in and say, you know, no, I'm you know, doing this 100% and try to really, really push, because, you know, the thing is, when I'm there, I don't think about trying to influence the Republicans on the floor, right? I mean, they're not gonna vote differently because of something I say on the floor. They've already decided what they have to do in caucus or whatever. I'm talking to the public. I am talking to the public, and I'm trying to show people how crazy this stuff is and how extreme this stuff is and how out of touch with Iowa all of this is. And so I think that for us in the legislature, that's what we have to keep doing. We have to keep doing that, getting the word out, talking to people, trying to be the grown up in the room, trying to be the voice of reason, and show people that, you know, this extreme stuff we're doing right now is just not consistent with Iowa values. In terms of, you know, organizing, I think there's actually a lot of thinking that's going on right now about messaging. I think that the Democrats really have some soul searching to do about what our messaging is. You know, we have to think about what resonates with people, what's consistent with our values, but say it in a way that really resonates with people. And I think that there are a lot of good people thinking about that right now. And so, you know, I'm hopeful that we will do that. But I have to tell you, I mean, I think the Democrats really have to work hard at that, because a lot of what we want to say is more complex. It's more nuanced, right? Because the world is complex and nuanced. And I think we're right about that. But at the same time, you know, the Republicans come out with their little 3-word defund the police or stop the steal, and that resonates with people, and frankly a lot of times with people who maybe aren't very educated, right? And that's one of the reasons we're becoming the party of the educated and they're becoming the party of the uneducated. And so I think that we have to really think about what is going to resonate. What are those values, those kind of simple messages that we can get across about our values? Because I do think we have the better product. We just have to work on our advertising, and so I think that's, those are some things that we need to do, but staying engaged, keeping your ear to the ground, inputting, giving your input in terms of, what's going to resonate with people. I think all of those things are really important. And I agree with Joe that, finding those really good candidates who are going to resonate with people in their local districts, I think that's really, really important. I said a while ago, some of these races were won by 100 votes, 200 votes, 300. That is not much to turn around. And I can tell you, because I'm there with these people, the folks who were voted in with those 100 vote margins, 200 vote margins, not very impressive. So let's find some good people and run them and get our message out there. And frankly, one of the things I'm telling people is we ought to start advertising now. We ought to start getting the word out about what the crazy things are that these Republicans are doing and start getting people's minds around that, because these people are listening to conservative talk radio all day, every day. If we just try to come in the last 2 months before an election and change their minds, that's not going to work, right? And so I think that, thinking of this as an ongoing thing, and that means giving money, frankly, it means getting the word out, but we've got to fight this fight all year round, and get the word out about what's happening, because I really don't think that what the Republicans are doing right now reflect your average Iowan's values. I don't. And I think that we really need to get that message out. And I'm hopeful that if we can get that message out, then we can at least reclaim some part of the legislature. And if we take back just one house or just the governor's office, that is going to change the entire dynamic. This complete control that we have right now is the problem. And I think we need to run on that and tell people that we need some balance. My message to independents and moderate Republicans is, even if you just want balance, you should vote for us, right? I mean, because right now you've got this extreme and they are running, rampant with what they're doing. And so we just need to get the message out for some balance in our government.
Joe, do you want to add to that? And then we'll
Yeah,
go to...
we're in a rut here, and it's going to take time, Tim, to dig out of it. I mean, we've been demonized. Democrats have been demonized. People don't like our brand. We lost races by 4,000 or 5,000 votes. Some of these Senate races that, 6 years ago, we held the seats by the same margin. The effect of Trump in Iowa in 2016 and 2020 has just been toxic. And so I do think we need candidates that can get out and actually hopefully campaign door to door and show people they're not the devil. They're not pedophiles. They're not, all the things that people think we are. And it's been really divisive. And race has been another huge issue that's been used against us, and fear. And I think at the end of the day, we need to recruit people that have demonstrated accomplishments in their communities, that can go out and talk to people and put a face on, our agenda. I think these last couple elections have been less about issues and more about tribalism. I don't know if 2022 is going to be an election about issues. I can tell you that the Republicans that are passing this stuff that we think is, beyond the pale, they think they are improving Iowa. They think they are making an Iowa that everybody wants to be in, right? They do not think they're doing bad things to the state. I know we differ strongly about this on a host of issues, but they do not think that they're on the wrong path here. We had a state senator a couple counties over at a forum say, if you don't like it here, leave, at a recent forum, right? As she was being challenged about some particular issue. So I think continuing to be involved with Potluck Insurgency, I think continuing to support candidates. We got outspent 2-1 in our races, right? I mean, when you're in the majority, the money just comes to you. So we just have to claw back. We have to fight back in every place we can. And I think it starts with getting the right people on the ballot for us, and putting the resources behind it. And I know everybody, for the most part, that can hear my voice, has been a strong supporter financially and in every other way of the work that has to happen really in a lot of other places outside of Johnson County. Thanks for having us tonight. We really appreciate it. It's great to see everybody.
Yeah. I know there are more questions out there, but if we just don't have time to get to everyone, I put the email addresses of both Representative Bohannan and Senator Bolkcom in the chat. You're welcome to take those up and ask questions that way if you want. But we're going to move on now. Roseanne, it's time now to move on to the what you can do to contact your legislator part. Is that right, of the agenda?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's been coming up throughout our conversation.
Yeah. So
we've already had some conversation about that, but I think Sarah and Janice have a few concrete pieces of advice to add to what's been said.
Yeah, and Joe and Christina, jump in if there's more that you want to add to what we're talking about. But basically, as we get to the end of the session, there may be things you really want to advocate for, particularly in terms of budget and funding. In some ways, Cecilia, this is an answer to your question as well. What can I do, to get through to the Republicans or to somebody who's really needs to hear from people about a specific issue? Yeah, Janice and I will talk a little bit about that. I'll start. As you may know, I am Representative Bohannan's legislative clerk, which means I see all of her email. So I've gotten a pretty fine-tuned sense of what works when you're contacting a legislator and what doesn't work, or what doesn't work as well. And again, Joe and Christina, you guys jump in if you have thoughts about this. But if there is something you really care about, one thing that people do often is they're a member of the Sierra Club or of the National Organization for Women or Planned Parenthood, and they get an email from that organization and it says, contact your legislature later, click this link, put your email in, and they'll send an email on your behalf. We get a lot of these, and they're form emails. We respond to as many as we possibly can, but they're not as effective as an email that really is from you, from your heart, and is personal. So for example, one of the bills that Representative Bohannan mentioned earlier was the manufactured housing bill, which is all about fairness for people who live in manufactured housing and dealing with horrible out-of-state landlords. And we got emails from people who are in this situation, and they were heartbreaking. And so even there was a point where Christina wasn't even on the subcommittee, but we're doing everything we can to help this particular group of people because it was so important to them. And they had, they were really organized, getting those emails in, and those emails really resonated because they were personal. The other thing that you can do is sometimes we get emails that are sort of scattershot. They've been sent to every single legislator in the House, and a lot of times there may be a bill that Christina's not on the subcommittee, she's not on the committee. It's something she can't really do anything about until it gets to the floor. So a good thing to do is to dig into the legislative website. I'm going to share my screen with you right now. And so you can see the legislative website. Can you guys all see that? Yes? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So the thing about the legislative website is it's pretty arcane. It's hard to navigate. There's so much information. But what you want to do is to go in and find the bill that you're interested in. So let's say HF 814, which is unfortunately the bottle bill, which may be dead, according to Joe. But you can look at the bill, right? Not always easy to read, but over in the sidebar, you can also see what's going on with the bill, what's happening with it. and you can see, for example, who's on the subcommittee for that bill. Those are the people you want to talk to right now, right? So Representatives Lundgren, Eisenhart, and Nordman. Those are the people who need to hear about the bottle bill. And you can go find those legislators, representatives. Where is Shannon? What's her name? You can look them up, and find them. And then, oh, there's Christina Bohannan, and contact them directly and say, hey, I know you're on this subcommittee. Make sure you move this bill forward. It's really important to me, and here's why. So that you're showing, as Kathleen did earlier, talking about the mental health bills, that you're tracking a bill, you care about it, you care about what's happening to it. So that's the kind of thing. And I don't think I could teach you how to use that legislative website. You just got to go mess with it and dig around in it and figure out. There's so many different ways to track bills and to figure out a bill's history and so on, that it would be, just get in there and look at it. So I'm going to hand it over to Janice to add anything. And also, if you guys
Can I
have
just
any
add
questions.
one thing to that, Sarah, real quick?
Yeah.
And so as I think Sarah did a great job kind of showing that legislative website and tracking. And so, when a bill gets to subcommittee, you can look up the people who are on subcommittee, send things to them. Then it might advance to the committee. You can do the same thing at that stage. But contacting people within, a couple days maybe of when that committee meeting is going to be, I think is the most effective thing to do, because that's when it gets on people's radar screens and they really start to think about it. But if you have any questions about any of this, you can always contact us. If you go on the website and you can't find the bill that you care about, you can't find what you're, contact me, send an email to me at the legislative address. Sarah or I will get back to you and help you, figure that out. So don't feel bad about contacting us. That we do it all the time.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. I definitely reiterate to that. The other thing is, like Christina said earlier, like, don't tell people you're from Iowa City. The thing is that the people that run the bills, the people who are in charge, are the majority party. It's Republicans. So you're going to have to reach out to Republicans. I mean, that's the thing, is you may feel like it's very frustrating. You may feel like they're not listening, but the school vouchers bill, they heard from a lot of people, a lot of personal emails. A lot of people were very upset. And I think that really, really mattered. I think that's why the bill stalled out in the House. They heard from so many people. So those emails really do matter, I think.
So I don't think I have a whole lot to add to what you all said and what's been said over the course of the past hour plus. I just have a couple little things. One, someone mentioned going to the Capitol. If you really, really care about something and there's going to be a public, in particular, if there's going to be a public hearing, you can get onto that website. You can sign up to speak, and you can go to Des Moines. And you may only get 2 minutes, but if you organize yourself really well, you can get a lot into 2 minutes. So my example is, I cared a lot about the voting bill. I worked really hard on fitting what I needed to into 2 minutes. I went up and I got my 2 minutes. And part of that has now made it into Mark Elias's lawsuit, much to my surprise, that he's suing the state along with LULAC about the changes to the voting law. So you can, even in 2 minutes, if you're really well organized, you can make an impact and you can make a difference. I also think that something that we may not be thinking about a lot is some of these weird bills that are coming up, and seemingly extreme bills, whatever the Republicans are coming up all over the place in this country. A lot of these are not just Iowa specific, including some of the ones that didn't pass, like the tenure issue, for example. They have a similar bill in Florida right now that's actually passed the legislature there. So that, as well as a lot of the back the blue issues and others. So it's not necessarily just to us crazy Iowa Republican legislators thinking up things. Some of these things are popping up all over the place. And I think you really covered everything else, sort of the tell your story, one way or another, if you're writing an email, if you're talking to them on the phone, if you're going to the Capitol, tell a story.
The other thing I would add to that is, especially because I know you guys are working on a letter right now, is the letters to the editor. Maybe Joe or Christina can add to this. But I think the legislators read those, or they hear about them. In the State House, we get every day a roundup of all of the really key letters or key articles about big issues. And so, you think you're writing the letter to convince other people, but you're also getting to the legislators. So if there's like a consensus of opinion that's out there, I think that will resonate with them as well.
Yeah, I think really, 200 words or less letters are always the best, short and sweet. On the question of email, Representative Bohannan and I, we get a lot of email, and I know, and Sarah is doing a fantastic job managing it. I have a clerk also. First thing we do is figure out if it's somebody from Johnson County, right? I get email from all over the state, but I mostly care about people in Johnson County and in my Senate district first and foremost. So we immediately go to work to figure out, is this somebody that is in Iowa City? And if somebody doesn't tell me that, then I look, is it a university email? You'd go on the CSI of who the hell is this? Is this somebody I need to worry about? Because you get a lot of email, and most of us care mostly about the people we represent. I do pay attention to other issues, and I've gotten probably 50 or 60 issue folders that I've got developed on my Outlook right now from issues this session, and they'll have like 5 or more emails. You get a folder, and I think it probably does help. I mean, the idea of not telling them you're from Iowa City, I'm not sure that really matters. If they don't know who you are, they probably aren't going to care what you think. It is good to make it easy for legislators to figure out who you are, probably is worth doing. But, Representative Bohannan and I suffer from the same problem. We are also from Iowa City, right, as members of the legislature, and get whatever attitude people have about Iowa City people every day from our colleagues. It is what it is. Iowa City is in Iowa.
We're still Iowans.
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate the point about going in person. I think that's been hard for Democrats this time, because we actually took, COVID seriously. We thought it was really a thing. And so people didn't want to go to the Capitol, and rightly so, because they weren't taking precautions. Totally get it. But as a result, we haven't had as many people come to the subcommittees and things like that on some of the issues that I know that people who wanted to be there just couldn't be there. So I think that's a thing. And I also think that the lack of door knocking, just to go back to something people said earlier, I think the lack of door knocking in 2020 really hurt the Democrats. We were getting saddled with everybody was Nancy Pelosi. Every Democratic candidate that ran for any office in Iowa was essentially Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, that's what they did. Nothing against Nancy, but like, if people don't like her, then that was a problem for Democrats in Iowa. And also getting saddled with, defund the police or all of these things. That's a lot easier for the Republicans to do when there isn't a very nice person knocking on their door, as the candidate, smiling at them, having a conversation, answering their questions. And, it's really easy to demonize people when they're not coming to your door and they're not showing up, they're not having this conversation with you, and there's not that personal connection. So, I do think that has been a problem in 2020 election. I think it's kind of been a problem at the State House, with the lack of people showing up. I will say that's where, we had that public hearing on the election bill, and Emily Sullivan showed up, Janice Weiner showed up, other people from Iowa City, and all over the place. And we had more than 1,000 public comments against that bill, and only, I think, ultimately something like 50, 60 or something like that for it. And I think even though that bill passed, so that was frustrating, I will tell you that that's part of the reason why now we are seeing this technical corrections election bill coming forward, because the Republicans realize that a lot of people are very, very angry about this bill. So it, even though it passed and that was just infuriating, at the same time, I think they're realizing that, and now they're having to make some changes. So, it does have some effect, but I think that in-person piece is really important. So, I know the pandemic's been going on, but when it's at all possible, I think that showing up in person, whether it's door knocking or whether it's at the Capitol, really does make a difference.
Yeah. Go ahead, Roseanne.
I was going to add something that I remember from the debrief that we did with Joe, Mary Masher, Christina, and Dave Jacoby. And it was humorous at the time, but I remember Dave talking about his 37 cousins in Boone County and saying, if you have friends and relatives in other parts of Iowa, going to Christine's point about the problem of being from Iowa City, if you have friends or relatives elsewhere in the state, educate them, bring them along, try to get them to get involved and reaching out to their legislator. Or writing editors to the editor. So I know at the time, sometimes you don't know whether Dave's, kidding you or not. I don't know if he really has 37 cousins in Boone County. That's his claim, but but it was a good point. I think that's one way to reach outside of our bubble. And I'm going to bring this to a close. My gosh, this has been a wonderful, wonderful event tonight. Thanks so much to Joe and to Christina. It's just been marvelous to have you. I think we could be here forever with you guys. And thanks to Sarah for facilitating, to Emily and to Janice. Letters to the editor. One of our ongoing projects is to get involved in with Tony Andrews, who is the public relations chair for the Johnson County Democrats, and he is heading up an organized effort to write letters to the editor. And I will, thank you, Sarah, just put his email in the chat. Tony would love to hear from you. They haven't had the first meeting of their group yet. It's going to come up soon though. And he says, guaranteed, no need to have a background or experience in writing letters to the editor. If you haven't done this before, we will train you, we'll show you how to do it. And I know that he's working with some other people on ways to get letters to the editor to places throughout the state. Excuse me, I should have brought some water in here with me. When we were doing the debrief, which I hope you've all read or at least heard about by now, it is on the Potluck Insurgency website, we heard a lot about messaging. And I know it's come up tonight, the need for Democrats to speak out to try to combat this toxic messaging that conservative media is feeding to people 24/7 all over our state and elsewhere. And also to advocate in a positive manner for our values and what we stand for. So letters to the editor are one way to do that. We can't wait until the election cycle begins in 2022 for this kind of messaging. We've got to start now, and we've got to talk about what the Iowa legislature has been doing, and we've got to talk about what we want to do instead and what we would do for the people of Iowa and how we reflect their values so much more accurately than the Republicans do right now in our state. So please get involved with that. Get in touch with Tony and he will get back to you. I talked to him earlier today. We're also wondering if any of you are interested in training on relational organizing. Sarah, a quick note about that.
Sure, just a quick note. Relational organizing is just kind of a much better than phone banking way of reaching out to people. I won't get into it anymore because I did talk about it recently at a Potluck Insurgency meeting, but after the legislative session is over, we will be getting some training on how to do relational organizing from a pro. So stay tuned to the Potluck Insurgency newsletter, or if you're here from Northside Dems or Eastside Dems, we'll get you information out about that.
Yeah, and I would encourage you to do that. I mean, it seems pretty clear to us, to Sarah, Emily, Janice, and I, when we did that debrief report, folks, we cannot be doing the same old in Iowa. We're not going to come back doing the same old, same old. So we need to find some new strategies, some new ways of doing things. And I think relational organizing holds a lot of promise for us. So I hope you will let Sarah know that you're interested in that, and we'll all participate in that training. So that's a couple of projects that we're working on. And we also wanted to mention quickly, our next event will be Sunday, May 16th. May 16th, 6:30 Sunday night, another Zoom event. We may try to do something in person in June, but we thought for May, we'd better stay with Zoom. And at that point, we're hoping to do a recap of the 2021 session, which will presumably have been over a couple of weeks by then. Talk a little bit about what to expect next time. And again, going to Tim's point, talk about what we need to be doing between now and the next session in order to get ready for, what they might do that's even worse or might try to do.
Roseanne,
So
I heard
anyway.
back from Zach Walls, who will probably be joining us for that.
Oh,
meeting.
good. Okay, great. So we have the Senate Majority Leader, and we hope to have the House. It's not, but yeah. Well, now the Minority Leader, right? Yes, true. Yeah, and Minority. Sorry, I want Zach to be the Majority Leader. Maybe someday, or Joe, or somebody. But anyway, thank you all so much for coming. Hope we see you again on May 16th. Have a good evening and take care. Be safe, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Ellen. Bye,
Thank you.
everybody. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Christina.
Thank
I
you.
wish we'd had time for all the questions. We just got so backed up.
Well, there was a lot. It was a good
Yeah.
crowd though. Really good
Yeah.
crowd.
It was
Yeah.
like 40 some people. I mean, yeah, it was great.
Well, and more than that, because some of them were two people on one screen. So
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
at least
Yeah.
50 people here tonight.
Yeah. It was
Really
great.
good. Thank you so much, Christina. You're always.
Yeah, no, thanks for doing it. I love this group. You guys are doing great work, really, and I'm thrilled about the debrief. I really hope that people take that to heart, and I'm hoping that once the session is over, I can help with some of that messaging and things like that, because I think that's absolutely key. I mean, there's just this sense that somewhere, the Democrats just have gotten off track in terms of connecting with Iowans. There's a sense that that Iowa just is not, just doesn't like Democrats anymore. I mean, I hear people in my caucus say this, and so there's just a lot of work there to do with that messaging, and I absolutely believe it can be done. I really do. I hear from Republicans on my I have a lot of Republicans on my newsletter list, and so they'll write back, and at first they're really mad, why do you think this, or why do you think that, or whatever. And I just very calmly, write them back and thank them for writing. And I explain exactly what I think and why I think that. And I would say almost every time, we get this dialogue going, and then they say, oh, thanks for explaining that. Like, okay, and I say, please reach out more. I think we need to talk more between, not be so tribal, have conversations. And we just need to do more of that. We need to see where people are. We need to respect them. We need to respect their thoughts, try to talk to them, and just not be, disdainful, even when I really, really disagree with someone, I just really have to hang in there and try to talk to, and I'll tell you, Sarah can attest. I mean, almost every time on email, we end up having a pretty good conversation, and I think that they understand where I'm coming from. They respect me and my thoughts, and I think that I show that I can respect them, and I think that that's really important. But we've just gotten away from that lately on both sides, and so I think that it's really important that we get back to that we get good candidates, that we come up with good messaging, because I do not think that what's happening right now policy-wise is where most Iowans are. But I think there's something about the messaging that isn't resonating with people on the Democrat side. And we've got to figure that out and get our candidates out there and have them meet people in person. And, I think that I'm hopeful that we've seen the change now at the national level, and that movement will kind of start to filter down to the state level. But this is a movement. This was a movement. And so I'm hoping that ultimately that we'll see what happen in the states, what's happened at the national level. I know that's optimistic, but I don't think pessimism gets you anywhere. So, and I certainly don't want I don't want to depress people and make them feel like this isn't worth it, because I really do think it is worth it to do this work.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Right on.
I think I appreciate your encouraging everybody to not be so depressed that they just give up. We just can't do that. We cannot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Absolutely.
Well, 3 weeks to go, Christina. Hang on.
That's right. Exactly. I have the optimism of this new person. I absolutely love this work. And I always feel such a sense of, I love talking to my own constituents and, informing people, keeping them up to date, advocating for them, all of that. But I really do love when I hear somebody who disagrees with me, and I can either persuade them or show them that there's value in why I say what I say, and I always feel a real sense of accomplishment with that. And so, I think that there's a lot we can do here. I really do. I think there's a lot of improvement we can do in our messaging and our campaigning and our organizing and all of that. And so I'm optimistic. I think, we can only go up from here, right?
It can't get any worse.
That's the good news, So I think that's a good thing, but we need to not get discouraged. I think that's absolutely maybe the most important thing. And I know how hard 2020 hit people, because it hit me the same way, but we absolutely can't change anything if we give up. That is the 100% sure thing. And so we have to resist that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, maybe one of the challenges too is that once the session is over, there's probably a tendency to people to say, whew, glad that's over with till next year. We can't let that happen either. We have got to keep the conversation going,
right.
through the summer, through the fall.
Right.
We can't just sit back.
Right.
So, yeah.
I agree. Well, let me know how I can help. Sarah and I have been talking about continuing to do some newsletters, maybe once a month or so. Just keep people informed about different things. That'll be fun to do. And then, but in terms of messaging, in terms of keeping people motivated, or, just working on anything like that, I'd be happy to help with that, because I agree that we should not, we can't wait until election season is upon us. There are too many forces pushing people the other way all year round. And we can't expect to come in with 2 or 3 months before November and think that we're going to persuade people. That's not going to happen. So, I think that we really need to work the rest of the time as well.
We're lucky to have you, Christina. Thank you so much.
I'm lucky to represent you guys. I have the best district in the whole state. How lucky am I? So.
You do. That's true.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Take
Good
care.
night.
See ya.
Sarah, thank you so much. Great job.
Sure thing. All right.
My
We'll talk to
gosh.
you soon.
We should have scheduled this for an hour and a half, I guess, huh?
Well, I think
we could have gone that long.
We could
Yeah,
have. I know. I felt badly cutting people's questions off, but what can you do?
Yeah, right. It was a good event. Thank you.
It was good. Take care.
Take care. See you.